This is Pre-Market Prep. I'm Brianna Valesky in for Joel Elconin. I'm on the line with Roberto Pedone. He is the CEO of Zero Sum Trading. Roberto, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday morning.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here.
So to get things started, give us a little bit of your general market outlook right now. What are you seeing?
Well, my general market outlook right now is that most of the major indexes, if you look at the S&P or the Nasdaq or even the Dow, looks like we've double bottomed um, when we touched the previous lows in August here in October, and we've entered back into an uptrend. And almost every one of those indexes are now trading back above their 50-day moving averages, which in the technical land is generally considered a bullish sign, although they are still below their 200-day moving averages. But it looks like we are going to, in the least in the short term here, is go up and test those 200 days on all of the major indexes in the U.S.
So what are you watching specifically? I know you mentioned you were looking at a couple of setups in mid to small cap stocks. What's showing up on your radar?
There's a couple of names in the mid to small cap space that I like the technical setups of here.
Okay.
One of them is CJES, which is C&J Energy Services.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of your viewers were to pull up a chart on this, they'll basically see what you'd see in almost any oil or energy stock
Oh, yeah.
over the last over the last 6 months. These charts have just been destroyed. These stocks have declined and plunged dramatically, and they were in clear downtrends. And there's probably nobody that would argue that. But now, specifically with this one and with many of the others in the space, they've started to base down here. And when I say base, what I basically mean is that they've trended in a sideways chart pattern,
Mm.
and now some of these are starting to break above the upper end of those chart patterns, and we're seeing much better volume flows come into these names. And this specifically is one that is setting up and showing that pattern right now.
Oh, well, do you have any sort of scanners or screeners that make these stocks pop up on your radar? Like, what draws your this is for a small to mid cap stock? Like, what draws your attention to it?
The biggest thing that's going to draw my attention to these type of names is volume patterns.
Ah,
I,
okay.
yeah, absolutely. When I start seeing, increasing volume, major expansions of volume above the 2-month and 3-month averages of what those stocks trade at, and then I start seeing those equities take out, the upper end of their resistance points, that automatically is going to start getting me interested in these names. The volume, there's this old saying on Wall Street that volume never lies.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Yep.
I see that big volume coming in, those are the names I'm gravitating towards in the small cap space.
Yeah, definitely. I just put up a volume indicator for our chart on our chart here for our traders and investors to take a look at. And you can definitely see a spike in that what at the mid to late August area when it stopped that decline it had had over the past 6 months or so.
Exactly. If you
Mm-hmm.
look at, just for example, CJES's chart, the average volume as this thing came down in a major, major downtrend where it was making, lower highs and lower lows, and then you take a look at the volume we've had in just the last couple of months, it's dramatically expanding
Oh
down
yeah.
here. Right. So that, tells me there is probably some institutional activity. A lot of the traders or, let's just say mutual funds or funds that were long this stock have probably capitulated out of this thing. And now there's some people, stepping in to buy these beaten down energy names.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. You also mentioned a couple names in the biotech sector that you were looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. One of them is Veristem. The ticker on that is VSTM. And right now, one of the trends that I'm seeing in the
Ooh.
biotechnology space, and for whatever reason it is, and I don't necessarily have every answer to why this chart pattern is playing out in the market space right now, but we've had a lot of these biotech, small to mid cap biotech stocks that have been destroyed and they've gapped down on huge volume. And this is exactly one of those patterns. And these stocks, for some reason, I'm seeing this pattern pop up over and over where these stocks are now starting to rebound And, it could just be that there are some bargain hunters in the space after we had everything happen with, the Hillary Clinton tweets and the biotechnology sector getting destroyed. It looks like there's some people stepping back into these names as they start to consolidate after gapping down, and we're seeing volume come into them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So tell us a little bit more. I know you mentioned another name in the sector right now that you're looking at too.
Yes, another one would be SGMO, which is Sangamo Biosciences.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, this is another, this is kind of a prevailing trend in a lot of equities right now. There's just, stocks that have been in major downtrends for the last 6 months to a year, where the trend is really clear, where they're making lower highs and lower lows. And now we start to see, specifically like with this chart, where it may have formed a double bottom. It's trying to carve out a double bottom here at about 530 a share. And now we're starting to see some better volume come into the name,
Mm-hmm.
and potentially see patterns setting up where those patterns are starting to reverse themselves, potentially coming out of those downtrends, breaking back up to the upside, starting to break out. And if, specifically this name could get back above its 50-day moving average, it could be, at least in the short term, done in its downtrend.
Yeah, that's a great point. What about something like the IBB, just taking a look at the entire sector for biotechnology? Have you looked at that at all lately?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I follow the IBB pretty much every day because I trade pretty heavily in the biotech space. So, this is, again, the trend is prevailing of these, you know, it's been the indexes, it's been many of the stocks across the mid to small cap space. It's getting harder and harder to find stocks that are in very strong uptrends,
Mm.
whether it's in the small cap space, the large cap space, or the indexes. And the IBB, which is just, the ETF of the biotech sector,
Mm-hmm.
is the same thing, coming out of a big downtrend. You know, again, though, in the short term at least, looks like it's trying to put in a bottom, making some higher lows here, some better volume patterns coming into it after what looks like, at least to me, there was capitulation selling volume at the end of October. So if this can start, trending basically back above, 323-ish, we could, at least in the short term, be in for a move to go back up to and test the moving averages at the 50 and 200 days.
All right. I got one for you, and I did failed to mention this before we got on the line, but I've got a friend who's in BDSI right now. It's biodelivery sciences, and I'm no professional market technician, but I do not think this chart looks that healthy. So I would love to get your take on BDSI.
BDSI. Well, the thing about BDSI, unfortunately, here
Mm-hmm.
is it's going to be really hard to just basically go off of technicals
Okay.
because they're going to have a decision on basically a very key drug in their pipeline, and that's coming up. It's supposed to be on October 23rd. They're going to hear back from the FDA, and
Ah.
and yeah, that could happen before then. That's just like the last targeted date from the FDA that they would hear something from the company. So that's, yeah, it's not a great looking chart. I'm not going to say that it's anything that looks spectacular, but in the short term, if it could get above $7, I think it could definitely rip to the upside, maybe get into $8 before we hear from the FDA.
Okay. That's a great point. Thanks for going over that too. What about another one you mentioned was medical device player BIOL. Tell us what you're looking at in this one.
Yeah, this is a penny stock. Basically trading at $1 right now. Once again, another destroyed chart. And, anyone who's scanning the markets right now, and as they do their scans and they're looking for ideas, this is the prevailing trend that we've had as the indexes came out of their sideways patterns that we've had for months. Many equities, have come down and really, really, really crashed pretty hard. And this is, once again, same thing. However, what's interesting about this name is we had some very big block trades a few last week, and you can see the spike on the chart where we had about 1 million shares trade, and we did have some SEC filings come out where a large fund holder or a large insider increased his position down here. So, when I see stuff like that and I see large block trades going off, and again, this is a name looking like it's trying to bottom, making higher lows, with the potential to maybe break out above $1.08 here in the short term, that kind of stuff is definitely going to pop up on my radar.
Okay, yeah, great point. We've got a couple of our chat room participants are interested in getting your thoughts on some names here. One of the first ones they're mentioning is ESPR, and that's Esperion Therapeutics. This is one we were talking about earlier this week when we had some news from Eli Lilly. There we go. Eli Lilly was halted when it came out with some drug news, and then ESPR kind of got a little bit of pop of that earlier this week. But what do you see in this name?
In the short term, this setup it's okay. I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't love it here, but I will say this, and it's funny because, especially in the biotech space, this exact chart pattern is what we're seeing in a lot of these names,
Mm.
and basically that pattern is they come down very hard. Some of them have been gapped if they've had news, or like you were saying, it looks like they had some news from Eli Lilly on a partner drug. I'm not 100% up to date on the fundamental story in this name. However, it's gapped down with big volume, trying to consolidate here. At least in the last few weeks, it's made higher lows. And what I would tell anybody that's looking, in general to trade this name is look for a move basically above $30. And that
Mm.
could then get it back into the gap, maybe get some gap filling to the upside. If it were to break below 21.14, though, in the short term, I wouldn't really like it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another one coming out of the chat. Actually, I think you had made a call on this one. AQXP, Equinox Pharmaceuticals. Someone mentioned it's kind of been interesting to watch because of that one crazy day it had. Anything you're seeing in this now? And can you tell us a little bit about how you made that call?
Well, for anybody that, subscribes to my service, this was definitely my call of the year. Um, basically, this was a name that I just popped up on my technical radar back in August
Mm-hmm.
as it was consolidating around, looking like it was trying to bottom. And, we got some news um, in mid-August, and this stock, it just exploded. It basically went from a dollar, 60, well, not a dollar 65, but basically around $1.50 in the pre-market to 55.75 within two trading sessions. And anyone who knows who the Baker brothers are, they're a very famous biotechnology hedge fund. They were, hitting the wires, how they were stepping into this name. And again, this is just, when I'm looking for beaten down biotech stocks, and I see that these names start to consolidate, and all I really mean when I say that is they start to trend sideways after having massive moves in volatility, and then you get either the right news or you get large volume coming to the names.
Mm.
I'm not, I would never say I would see another move like this. Who knows for years when you see a stock go from a buck to 55, but you just
Right.
never know what can happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Also coming out of the chat, someone's interested in your take on Pfizer, ticker PFE, one of our big boys in the stock market.
Well, I just wanted to touch base really quick on
Oh,
AQXP,
absolutely. Go for it.
just because I'm sure people want to know how it looks
Yes.
here in the short term, and I do really like the way this is looking in the short term. It looks like it wants to break above a prevailing downtrend line that goes back to August. So, just for the traders at home, if this thing can get above 1630, I think a test of 19 and potentially into the 20s, low 20s is possible here with that one.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for giving our short-term outlook for that as well. It's something like Pfizer, bigger guy in one of the big ones in the market right now. Any thoughts on this one technically?
Well, Pfizer technically, there's nothing like screaming at me personally, that makes me want to love this stock or this setup
Mm-hmm.
right here. But it does look like it's trying to break out here, basically above 34 bucks. So, if it could still continue to trend above 34 in the short term, it looks good. This type of name, it's just not something that I personally trade a lot because they don't really, they don't move enough for me to really get super interested in them. But yeah, short term, it could, it is moving back above the 50 and 200-day moving average here, and anything above 34, good volume flows, looks decent short term.
Okay. I've got a little bit of a longer question for you. Rob Hood in our chat room wants to know what is a major factor in deciding to look at SGMO? than another bio like DYAX that hasn't been in such a long Dow trend. And let me know if you want me to repeat that or any of those tickers for you.
No, yeah, totally. I know both of
Okay.
those really well. What was the other one though? DYAX.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's a point to be made there. If you just look specifically from a trend perspective in these two names,
Hmm.
DYAX is definitely in a stronger trend. It's in a clear uptrend. It's broken back above both of its major moving averages,
Mm-hmm.
the 50 and 200 day. So yes, of course, this is a stronger looking name. Had a very nice move yesterday, but in the short term, that was a crazy move, big volume yesterday. It's come, off the lows in October from 17. It's come a long ways here. So, that's probably not one in the short term I'd want to be chasing.
Mm.
Whereas SGMO to me, I think the upside is greater because when I look at a chart like SGMO and it's been absolutely destroyed to the downside, coming out of a downtrend where that volatility, is off the map, where anyone who is long this name has been absolutely destroyed. I want to see that capitulation. Look for changes in volume patterns. Look for double bottoms to potentially form because there's going to be more upside in that name just because of how beaten down it is. Now, beaten down doesn't mean upside is guaranteed. But if I see the volume come in and I see it start taking out key resistance levels, I like an idea like that, at least short term, comparing both of these names up against each other.
Just a minute here left with you, Roberto. Any final words of advice for our traders and investors listening to the show?
I would just say, be careful in general in the markets here because we've been in such a sideways pattern and we are coming off of, double bottoms here in the major indexes, but we're still, not out of the woods necessarily in the markets here. But if we can start challenging highs, I think everything would be okay in the short term. But just keep in mind that this market has been a sideways trendless market now for pretty much all of 2015.
Awesome. We've been on the line with Roberto Pedone. He's the CEO of Zero Sum Trading. Roberto, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We really appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to have you on again soon.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.